It's truly a treat for me to be with you tonight. I begged Justin and Justin for the opportunity to introduce tonight's guest. And I just want to tell you quickly why. I have been in this space, health and wellness and beauty, for 30 years. And never in my 30 years have I seen something as exciting as what we have to bring to the marketplace. I want to just tell you a quick story to provide a little context to the introduction of Dr. Nora Khaldi, who we'll hear from here in a moment. You know, any of us who have been involved in direct selling for any period of time know that in order for us to succeed in the marketplace, we have to bring real innovation to the marketplace. We cannot sustain our generous commission payouts with the same products that you can buy everywhere else in the world. And we need differentiated, innovative technology, differentiated, innovative products that truly change people's lives. So over the years, as I have just kind of refined my own compass to these kinds of innovations, I've had many opportunities to visit other companies. And one of those opportunities came when one of my dear friends, who was the CEO of Avon Products at the time, phenomenally successful company. She was a phenomenally successful CEO, Andrea Jung. She invited a few of us to the Avon headquarters and the Avon Innovation Center outside of New York City to see what they do in the lab and to introduce us to Avon's next big innovation. And so I was excited to go, went. You know, incredibly impressive lab, lots of white coats, lots of people in white coats walking around. And the time came for the introduction of the next big Avon innovation. And, you know, drum rolls, and in walks into the auditorium, a bunch of people in white coats with silver trays. And on these silver trays were 17 new shades of lipstick. Now, look, I'm not here to diss my friend Andrea Jung or Avon Products, because we should all do so well as they have. But I kind of sat there in my chair thinking to myself, you know, okay, 17 new shades of lipstick, great. But is that real innovation? Is that really technology that changes the world? That's what I'm after. That's what we're after. That's what we need. And so when Justin and I first ran into Nuritas, we recognized very quickly that what we have here is something that is truly landscape changing. We had the opportunity to meet Nora and her team. Now it's been over a year, and had the opportunity to get to know them. Nora Khaldi is a PhD. She refers to herself as a mathematician, but in fact, her PhD is in molecular biology and bioinformatics. She's both a scientist and a mathematician. She's the founder of Nuritas. She's been working on this company for over 10 years. She's raised over $100 million in venture capital money, and these dollars do not come easily. This is smart money backing this company, and they have poured an awful lot of money into it because they believe, as we do, that what we're talking about here is truly landscape changing. I believe that it is. I believe that in the health and wellness and beauty space, there's been nothing like this come along in 30 years. You know, when we have the ability, when our partners like Nuritas have the ability to identify specific biological needs and craft a smart bomb that can be ingested through and run through the gut and hit the target exactly, as opposed to just dumping more and more nutrients into our system in kind of a carpet bombing fashion, hoping that we hit the target. It's literally like going from World War II technology to modern warfare. That's what Nuritas technology allows us to do, is influence body chemistry in a very precise and in a very exact way. So I'm just so delighted to introduce you all to a truly remarkable human being, a truly remarkable visionary, a charming and an articulate person who is going to, I think, light you up like she lit me up to the world of peptide sciences. So without further ado, let me introduce you all to Dr. Nora Khaldi, founder and CEO of Nuritas. Nora.
Thanks, Truman, and thanks, Paulette, as well. It's always really interesting when you meet people that have the same vision. It's incredible, actually, because a lot of good things can happen. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that in terms of who we are at Nuritas, how I brought my background to create Nuritas, and then a little bit about peptides, because I know you're all big fans of peptides and it's important. And then obviously I'll talk to you a little bit more about one of the products you have with our peptide inside and how it's a product that we should all be using every single day. So I'm just waiting for someone to actually share my slides. I did prepare some slides, that's it. So I'll talk to you a little bit about what we're using to discover the peptides, and the session is divided into these three parts. So who we are, peptides, and PeptiStrong, which is the last ingredient we have. I want to first tell you a little bit about why I founded the company. So I'm, like Truman said, a mathematician, computer scientist with a PhD in molecular evolution and bioinformatics, a lot of studying to apply it finally and to create things that really can improve the world. The whole purpose of Nuritas and why I founded Nuritas at the beginning is to improve the lives of billions of people. And that's really the mission of Nuritas today. And what we do is that we use AI. The original technology itself was programmed by myself, and then now we have a lot of AI experts that have really grown that technology, and we use that AI to discover first-in-class peptide ingredients. And then the team itself at Nuritas, I know you're seeing myself today, and you'll be seeing some of my colleagues in the future as well, presenting some of our ingredients. But ultimately, we're a team of pioneers. We're mathematicians, biologists, computer scientists, chemists, all types of backgrounds coming together to create technology that can actually identify peptides in nature that really are transformative from a health perspective and bring them to market. And we work with different industries, and really it's that combination of very different languages. The language of life science, the language of mathematics are superbly different, but really using those to decipher what nature has to offer. Nature has trillions and trillions of different molecules, all interesting, some more than others, and it's all about identifying the one molecule and associating it to a health benefit. So this is the goal. So for Nuritas, really, it's about identifying all the major targets. These are just very few, and identifying a solution for each. If it's cognition, how can we find a peptide in nature that can really improve our cognition? If it's muscle and skeletal muscle and lean muscle, how can we improve lean muscle, identify a peptide in nature that can do that, et cetera, et cetera. So it's literally target-based. So for every target in the human body, how can we find a molecule in nature to address it significantly and improve it? But really, I know you've been working on peptides for the past short while, and peptides weren't known a couple of years ago. Very few people were talking peptides, only the nerds really. And frankly, AI either. Very few people were talking about AI. Yet both AI and peptides have been really everywhere for decades. But it's only now that they're becoming relevant and concrete, because now we understand the power of a peptide. Now we can actually discover a peptide. And AI is a tool that now consumers can actually use more and more. And this is why it's becoming more and more relevant, but they have always been there. In fact, peptides have been in nature for millions, hundreds of millions of years, used by different species to outcompete others, or to promote growth, or to protect themselves from fungal infection, or so forth, in different plants, etc. Only humans, we've not really been exploring that area very well. So what's a peptide? A peptide on the left-hand side that's kind of how a peptide looks like. They're usually signaling a messenger, so they tell the body what to do, they signal. And once they signal, there's a cascade of events that occur in your body, and then the body just gets rid of it. I call it the language of life because basically every signal in your body, anything you do goes through a peptide. So whether it's us, whether it's a plant, a bacteria, an animal, all living species signal through peptides. So they're a very important molecule in nature. A peptide usually is part of a protein. That's the middle one. Protein are these massive, I call them peptide carriers. They're massive globular molecules, and within them you find these little peptides hidden within the protein structure. So if you think about it, a protein is a carrier of peptides. The problem is that we have not been able as humans to discover those parts of the protein that when released become a peptide, an active peptide. That's the real issue, and I'll explain a little bit further. So if you take that middle one, which is a protein, and you kind of unfold it, it's like a string that you kind of unfold. That's the bottom line. You can write it in what we call alphabets or amino acids. So that's the bottom line. That's an open protein sequence. And a peptide is simply a part of that sequence. And not every peptide is active, but sometimes you'll find a part in that protein. Once you cleave it, once you break it out of the protein and it's released, it becomes an active peptide, and it has a very important function. And this phenomenon actually is really interesting because in nature, if you think about it, this phenomenon has occurred a lot. Like proteins would carry peptides, and under certain conditions, let's say your blood pressure is too high and you want to lower it. So the protein will break up a peptide from it to lower blood pressure. Or you get cut. So your proteins in your skin will release certain peptides that would reduce inflammation, help the cells grow, etc. So it's a really interesting, these are blocks within the protein that are only released under certain conditions. Usually repair, positive conditions, or positive effects of those peptides under certain conditions. So why now? That's one of the reasons I was looking into it at the beginning when I first started understanding where could we actually apply our technology. And I looked at many different molecules. There's many different molecules out there. And peptides came as the top of all these types of molecules because they share a lot of similarities, one of which is they're very efficacious and they're safe. So efficacy is very important. We want to create things that bring together both the natural world, but also efficacy, because sometimes when people go too natural, it's not that efficacious, or very efficacious is very synthetic. It's really bringing those two together. So peptides is really interesting because it has that efficacy part and safety. They're also high selective molecules. So that means they, like I showed you at the beginning with the human body and the different targets in the human body, they usually are very selective. And you can say, I want to alter this specific pathway in the human body. You can actually find a peptide that would selectively bind and cascade a signal. They're also very predictable from a metabolism perspective. And what I mean here is that when the body uses a peptide, it can get rid of it. Very few molecules actually do that. Very often they just accumulate, which isn't good. So here the body can actually break up peptides into amino acids like the protein, and that goes back into making more protein. And so forth, lower regulatory barriers, etc. But at the same time, when I first started a few years ago, when I first started Nuritas, one of the biggest challenges with peptides had been always they were known to be poorly bioavailable or not stable. That was kind of the idea of what peptides. They were super efficacious, high selective, all the positives, but they weren't known to be bioavailable nor stable. And the reality is that what's interesting, when I first came into the field, I realized that the issue was not that they weren't bioavailable or stable, is that human technology and where humans have looked at peptides, they've looked at a very small pool of peptides. Peptides, if you think about it, they're the largest space known to humankind. There are infinite numbers of peptides, and it's very hard for humans to explore them all. So far we've relied on wet laboratories. So these are labs around the world to test peptide at a time, but that takes too long and it's too expensive. And as such, we've only explored a very little space. But through AI, and this is where my background came in, when I came into this area, I'm like, it's a data problem. There are so many peptides. We need to explore more of these peptides. And the only way you can explore them is through the use of artificial intelligence to mimic many, many different brains, and to explore many, many different peptides all at the same time, but rapidly. And this allows us then to explore more of that space. So you're not just focused on hormonal type peptides, which have, are not bioavailable, are not stable, because that's how they have been evolved by nature, but you can explore a lot more other peptides, what we call linear peptides out there, that have a stability framework and also a bioavailability matrix attached to them, and I can explain more. But through AI now, when Nuritas started using AI, it was to help humans explore more of the peptide space. Like I said, it's the largest space known to humankind. And what changed through AI and through Nuritas's technology is that now we can use AI to help us explore all these peptides. But not only can we find these peptides are efficacious, high selectivity, etc. on the left-hand side, but we can now find peptides that are orally efficacious, that you can actually take orally and they will have an efficacy, that peptides that are stable in formulation, because obviously when we're creating, like you are creating all these different formulas with peptides, you want to make sure that the peptide is stable, which is the case here. Peptides are stable within the formulation, they're orally available and efficacious. And also what's interesting is that we can produce them from a source material that we've kind of co-evolved with because we've eaten it for thousands of years. Like I'll give you an example later with PeptiStrong from fava bean, for example. And we have many more coming through from different sources. Again, when you eat the fava bean itself, you don't get the benefit because your body breaks it down randomly. But by actively releasing the peptide from the protein, you now can get that benefit that otherwise you won't get. And that's really the interesting thing. So today, this is why in our space, peptides are now on the rise everywhere. More and more people know about peptides, whether it's in the pharmaceutical space, whether it's in the consumer space, in our space, etc. Peptides are on the rise and they're going to become very, very big because now we can explore more of them. Now we can make them, we can find ones that are stable and orally available. Those are the weak points that were in the past are no longer today. And that's through the AI technology that Nuritas has developed. And to do that, I'm not going to go into much detail, but it took years of communication with, I'll just go back a slide, years of communication between the lab and the AI system. So as we were building the AI system, we were testing hundreds of millions of peptides in the lab. And the AI was learning on which ones were working, which ones gave certain patterns to a cell, how did a cell behave, or tissue, or human, how did they behave under the influence of peptide X, peptide Y, etc. And using that data, the AI now can go and explore more and identify for each of the targets in the human body a solution. So very often I get at this point, explain AI. So I think they're gonna show a video. It's not our video, but it's the best way for me to explain what AI is. So I'll leave you watch it.
But does your friend often do that?
Strange. We all right? Be back, Jeremy.
Hey, what was that?
Went forward in time to view alternate futures, to see all the possible outcomes of the coming conflict.
How many did you see?
14,605,000.
How many did we win?
One.
Okay, so while they're putting back up the video, the reason I showed you this, I think it's super important, but very often I get the question of how does AI actually work? And AI works fundamentally by looking at different scenarios, hundreds of millions of scenarios, every day, billions and billions of different peptides to find the one that's going to activate a certain pathway in the human body. And those are the numbers in reality. This is a piece of Doctor Strange. I'm a big fan of the Avengers and Doctor Strange. But ultimately, what he did simply is look at over 14 million futures and find the one where they actually could win. And that's the numbers you have to go to in order to find the one. In the peptide space, you really need to explore billions to get the one with an efficacy in a specific area. So what Nuritas really had done over the past few years is that it found a way to speak the language of nature, which is the language of peptides. It found a way to bring together the best of life sciences and how peptides can signal and modulate different pathways in the human body together with an AI system. And that's actually, it's not easy. It takes a decade at least to get it right in terms of when you bring a mathematician, a computer scientist, and a biologist, chemist, etc., in the room, they speak very different languages and they see problems very differently. And you have to create a unique language between them. And that takes years already to get it right. But also you have to, an AI system is not going to understand biology very quickly. And biology is not going to understand AI either. But you have to translate what one is saying to the other. So we built a lot of software behind the scene, separate to the AI model, just to translate a lot of that modeling of a cell, a lot of how biology works, ultimately at the molecular level, into a language that the AI can then pull off. We also noticed that when scientists in the lab, which is the traditional way of doing science, scientists in the lab, when they test, very often they're close to that molecule. So sometimes their views are subjective. And AI is very objective. So that means we had to pull sometimes the decisions to the AI in terms of looking at results and saying yes, no, and then repeating, making sure that it's repeatable and the result is actually repeated. So that took, again, many, many years in the background and cost a lot of money to create a technology that can now identify naturally occurring peptides that are hidden in nature that we as humans have not and could not explore with current traditional methods, now bringing into humans to improve billions of lives. And actually, just to give you, this is one slide just showing you that AI very often is not sexy. It looks like this. So people think about it like the previous AI system on the left-hand side, but ultimately what you see is a black screen. That's what we have with all the AI programmers in Nuritas. It's all about talking to this black screen and inputting data, and then the black screen will go off and identify different solutions in nature and bring them. But ultimately, just to continue on the peptide frame, not all peptides are equal. And this is very, very important to understand. Not every peptide is biologically active. You can find a small protein or small sequence in a protein. It's not biologically active. Very few are actually active. The active ones are called what we call bioactive peptides. So bioactive peptide usually has a clinical proof to that action. Also, not all bioactivity is precise. So you can have a clinical, but those peptides may not be precise. And we've coined that precision bioactive peptides from Nuritas. Those are what we call clinically proven. So they have clinicals proving the activity of the peptide. They're built for the precise sole purpose and mode of action that is necessary to have that effect. They're stable in formulation. Like I mentioned to you earlier, they're tailored by nature over hundreds of millions of years. Some of the peptides we discover are interesting because some of them are there. Like one of them is in the roots of a plant, and it protects the plant from drought and attacks of different fungal and bacteria, but it has been there for hundreds of millions of years, used by the plant, and it's only now that we can actually explore those peptides and get those that efficacy from them, and that they're naturally found as well. So not all peptides are equal, and this is really important. Not every peptide is bioactive. And not every bioactive peptide is precise. And bringing those together is what Nuritas's goal is, because ultimately we want to improve the lives of billions of people, and we want to create products that truly work, that people feel the difference, and improve health globally. And then why should you be working? I get that question very often with precision peptides. I think there are truly very, very few ingredients that have what a peptide has, or the precision peptides have. So that is addressing very clear consumer needs, so that they're not being created 70, 100 years ago with the hope that they'll work today, and retrofitted in what consumers are looking for. These peptides have been literally created for a very special need of humans and consumers today. And that, if you look at ingredient discovery as a whole, any molecular discovery, none of them have been tailored in our space for consumer demand. They've been retrofitted from ancient ingredients, retrofitted in what consumers are looking for, when they don't really solve that problem. So differentiated through the clinicals proving the efficacy of the peptide, the fact that you're bringing nature and precision together, and that's unique because you're either supernatural and very, very rarely are you efficacious, or the opposite, and those two together is really key. Addressing burning consumer needs and demands of today. And then what's interesting as well is that we discovered that the peptide awareness is growing. And that's really interesting because that awareness is going to keep growing. And not only is it going to grow, the awareness on top of it of not every peptide is the same is going to be forefront as well, very, very clearly and very soon. What's interesting as well, which is not written here, is that technology is also advancing a lot. And it's interesting because technology will allow consumers to choose better. So wearables will allow consumers to know whether something is working on them or not. ChatGPT and the next versions of that type of technology will also allow better choices of products. So having ingredients that actually truly have clinical work with them, like some of the ones we're developing, is what we were trying to do for the whole industry. And then the interesting thing about a peptide as well is that it's cell signaling. And what that means is that because it's the only cell signaling molecule, so the majority of signals in the human body are via peptides, that makes it a very good synergistic companion to many other ingredients. So combinations of, if someone is taking something else, an additional peptide will always work in complementary to that something else. It's not going to be one or the other, which is really interesting as well. And it's both a nutrient and a functional molecule, and that's rare. Peptides are the only nutrient coded in the human genome. So that's really interesting. So they're both nutrients and functional molecules. Again, very, very rare. So the product I know you have that are working with one of our ingredients is the Make Fit one with PeptiStrong. PeptiStrong is a peptide that we discovered through our AI technology. And what's interesting about this peptide is that muscle health, I think people don't talk about, well, they are starting. And I think the whole Ozempic area has even augmented that. As people lose weight, you lose muscle, and has huge dramatic effects on people's health. Not only from a longevity perspective, so, living less than what you should, but also having longer years when you're not well and you can't move is not the purpose of this. Muscle is directly connected to your well-being, your movement, your mobility, how you look, It's the largest organ in the human body. It's basically how you look, whether it's in your face, your body, etc. Your metabolism, 80% of our sugars metabolize in the muscle. Your mitochondria home, so it's literally your energy hub. And that's only what people talk about. There's lots of papers coming out showing its impact on bone density, its impact on brain health, etc., etc. So muscle is really core to all humans, and we should really look after it. And it's not just core to athletes and people in the gym. It literally is all ages. So healthy aging, women's health. Of all ages. Menopause, the first thing that occurs is higher inflammation, higher cortisol, lower muscle, and as such, lower strength. But that starts really at the age of 28. Weight loss, massive area as well, where skeletal muscle is important because you don't want fat infiltration within the skeletal muscle. And sport and active nutrition as well. So muscle is really key to all these areas. And this is why we actually went after this area. You remember the 2 green bodies I showed at the beginning. The areas we go after are key to longevity and health in general, at all ages, and we should be all on them. And so we discovered PeptiStrong with 5 clear mechanisms, and the right-hand side just shows you some of the mechanisms of the peptides themselves. So PeptiStrong is a combination of a few peptides that target different targets within the human body. It reduces muscle degradation. It improves muscle production. It reduces inflammation. And as a consequence, there's higher mitochondrial count within the cell, so higher energy, muscle is preserved, your strength is preserved. And then what we discovered in the clinicals, as well as we've done many clinicals with this ingredient, we discovered also that bone density is also augmented. We weren't expecting that, but there's a clear rapport from a lot of publications out there between muscle health and bone density as well. I'm not going to go through all this, but ultimately what we did initially was just say, okay, how does it compare now that we've done all the clinicals with PeptiStrong in both women and men? How does it compare to other ingredients within the space of muscle? So when people talk muscle, they usually think creatine, leucine, HMB, and whey. Whey is the protein. How does it compare? Well, it's a lot of X is better than everything that exists in various different ways. PeptiStrong does a lot more than these 4 ingredients. But within the area that ingredient, let's say creatine, works, it's 5 times better. Whey has a certain activity in phosphorylation of S6, for example. PeptiStrong is 4 times better, but it does other things on top of whey as well, etc. Leucine 2 times superior at 100th of the dose, etc. But it also are synergistic with these ingredients. So like I mentioned earlier, peptide is interesting because the mechanism of action is through signaling, which is very different from other ingredients. So it is better, but also synergistic together. That's really, I think, a key learning. PeptiStrong, just to finish off, PeptiStrong is interesting as well because when we looked at it, I just calculated this quickly in terms of how many combinations would have taken us through traditional methods in the lab. If we didn't have AI, if we didn't have the magnifier AI technology that Nuritas has, it would have taken 1 quintillion combinations. That's 18 million combinations to find peptides, to find PeptiStrong specifically. But on top of it, to do all those combinations the proper way, it would have taken us 30 million years through traditional ways. And when I say traditional ways, I'm talking about the ways of today, really, which is I'm going to take something in the lab and I'm going to test it. I'm going to test something else and I'm going to keep testing until I find something. It would have taken about 30 million years to discover PeptiStrong through traditional ways and not through AI as we did today. And I think that's super important to grasp. And it's because it has multiple mechanisms. So if you multiply all those different mechanisms and the different peptides that do that in one, and you search all different species or sources For that peptide, this is what you get. I just want to finish off by saying that everyone really, and it's not, I'm not saying this because we're the inventors of PeptiStrong, or I truly believe that muscle is core to our health, our longevity, our energy. One of the statistics I showed you earlier is that it's really interesting for Nuritas, and I'm sure it's super interesting for yourselves as well, in terms of when you know you're impacting millions of people by this shift. So with PeptiStrong, for example, we focused on strength. So there's a lot of papers that show that by augmenting strength slightly, you reduce all-cause mortality. That includes all cancers, all cardiovascular issues, all metabolic issues by 17%. 17% is massive. There's no one drug or combinations of drugs that would have that effect. PeptiStrong does. So by improving strength in people around the world, women, men of all ages, we're literally giving them 17% reduction on top of everything else, on top of the X% strength recovery, on top of the recovery, anti-inflammation, bone density, and all those interesting things that we'll get through PeptiStrong. You are literally giving them years more to live in a healthy situation. So everyone really should be using the Fit for Make Wellness with PeptiStrong inside. I'll stop here. I think that was my last slide. If anyone has any questions.
Can you hear me?
Truman.
Thank you. You know, Nora, like, did you just hear what she said, everyone? I wish we could have her repeat every sentence multiple times, because it's mind-blowing. 30 million years it would have taken through normal laboratory techniques to discover the peptide matrix that's in our Fit product. I mean, you guys, this is why I've been so excited to get Nora in front of you all, because I knew because I'm watching the chat. I know she's lighting you up, and this whole thing is just, it's mind-boggling. Now, we only have a few minutes, but if you have any questions that you would like to pose to Nora, put them in the chat, because Justin Sarah's on the line, Mark Bartlett's on the line, Justin Prince is on the line, and we're going to have them pull those questions out and pose them to Nora quickly in just a few minutes that we have left. So put your questions in the chat. Nora, one of the questions that I wanted to just ask you really quickly is this, and it's one that's so easily lost, I think. These bioactive peptides, precision peptides that run through the gut, deliver their message to our body chemistry and then essentially dissolve into the body chemistry, right? And are flushed out. Whereas I think isn't one of the problems with big pharma the fact that they're putting synthetic chemicals into our body chemistry that are not flushed out, that create toxins that build up in the system, whereas Mother Nature is providing these bioactive peptides that cause no problems, no side effects. Did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely, Truman. So it's really interesting, because when I was looking at peptides and other types of molecules at the very beginning of Nuritas, the choices were many. We could go after any type of molecule using AI, but you had to train it. So you had to choose one and do it well. And we chose peptides, and it literally is because of that. Now, there are like lots of different peptides, but what's interesting is that it's the language of nature. It's the way our microbiome communicate with us and communicate together. It's how our cells communicate together. It's literally, like I say, the language of life. And what's interesting, because we have evolved with peptides, our bodies know what to do with them. So when their function is ended, it kills them. And it uses the different pieces called amino acids to create the next variety of proteins. And again, the cycle starts again. And like I say, sometimes if you had to imagine it, it's like a doorman who's told to open the door. And then the person will come and say, open the door, and then just leave. And the person opens the door because they recognize the person that's going to come in. If they don't recognize them, they'll keep the door closed. And that's the signal. The signal creates a cascade of events. The signal is open the door. I recognize this person. He's whatever, he works in this building. And there's a cascade of events, which is the person says it. The person opens the door, lets this person go, closes the door. The person goes, takes the lift. There was this cascade of events started with one single signal, and that's what a peptide does. And then that's it. The signal starts, the cascade of events occur, and the body just removes the peptide when needed, which is not the same for other molecules, Truman. Correct.
Yeah. Thank you. Karina and Mandy, can you bring Justin and Mark on the line so that they can ask some questions as well?
Yeah.
I have another quick one for you, Nora, while they're coming up. And it's this. My understanding is that Big Pharma is not a big fan of natural ingredients because they can't patent the formula like they can a synthetic drug if it's available in nature. But what I think is so amazing about what Nuritas has done is that you're extracting these natural peptides from natural sources. But another piece of the remarkable breakthrough is that you figured out how to enable them to run through the gut and get into the bloodstream, and that is proprietary to what you've developed, right?
Yes. So also, Truman, correct. Sometimes there's very little value creation in when you create something that's not patentable, viewed from the pharmaceutical world. Okay, so it has to be patentable so that they can own it and create revenue from it. Because if it's owned by everyone, then it's harder. What we were capable of doing is that although peptides are so-called natural, they're not really, because they're part of they are natural, they're in a protein, but they're not floating. They're not. So when you eat, let's say with PeptiStrong comes from a fava bean. You can eat as much as you want of fava bean. You won't get the benefit that PeptiStrong gives you. And there are clinicals showing that, by the way. And the reason is because your body breaks up the protein randomly. What we do is give access to that peptide, that specific sequence of amino acids to the human body. And that's patentable, very much like pharmaceutical patents. With a 20-year shelf life. So using this approach, we were capable of bringing that patentability to this area as well. And then I answered your first part, Truman. Your second part, what was it again? Remind me.
Well, just that part of the Nuritas technology is the ability to deliver these peptides through the gut, as opposed to having to stick yourself with a needle.
Yes. So, and that's a big one, because now technology has moved towards, identification. What's interesting about AI is that you can do multidimensional searches at the very onset. So you're not only asking for a peptide that works, but you're asking for a peptide that is bioavailable, that is stable, that sits within a certain cost. So you give it multiple parameters. And by combining all those parameters at the very onset of the research, you don't spend like years realizing at the end that, oh my God, I spent all this time and money, and I realized that my peptide at the end doesn't work, or isn't stable, or isn't bioavailable, doesn't work in human, etc. So you do that at the very onset, and that's the multidimensional thinking of the AI. And we had to build each one separately, by the way, to create that software. And also that, these peptides, if you're going at it randomly and you're finding a peptide and you take it to clinicals, very often the clinical will fail. So far, the clinical success we've had with the AI system is very, very high, in the 80s, 90% success rate in clinicals that we've done with new peptides coming through. And that's because the AI is capable of identifying those specific bioavailable peptides.
Right. Wonderful. Okay, JP, Justin, Sarah, Mark, Bartlett, you've been monitoring the chat. Throw Nora some hard questions, will you, in the remaining 5 minutes that we have?
Hard questions.
Well, Nora, first of all, man, what an honor to have you on here tonight.
Thanks, Justin.
The response has been amazing. We've been getting questions saying, can we have the list of peptides Nora is using, because she looks 21, so you look amazing. And
thank you.
We all want your accent too. So
the accent too. Okay. The accent is hard. The accent is harder. But the health, the peptides, starting with PeptiStrong, yes, go for it. One clarifying question I had. I just want to make sure I understand it properly. On the one that you did, the creatine, I think it was 5x, and then on the whey protein was 4x. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying there, because I know you're saying it works in synergy, but then also what was the 5x and the 4x? I just want to make sure that I understand that, because I think it's a really powerful point. Yeah, I'll actually bring it back up here. I bring it back. So here, so with whey, for example, what we're saying is that when you're looking at phosphorylation of S6 and the whole cascade of producing more muscle in the skeletal cells, so we did a clinical where we took biopsies and we looked at the cells taking whey versus taking PeptiStrong. And what we showed is that there's 4 times more production of protein within people taking PeptiStrong than taking whey. As an example, that's in one pathway, which is more protein production. What that means is that we're 4 times better. We can amplify the protein 4 times more. You can take PeptiStrong with like a 5 gram and have a 20 gram with PeptiStrong, or you can take PeptiStrong alone and have the same effect as a 20 gram whey if it's 5 gram your baseline, for example. If it's 20, it's 4 times that, etc. So that's kind of fundamentally what we looked at. But also we looked at with creatine, we looked at that was cellular work. So with whey, we did a clinical. With creatine, we did a lot of cell work, because once you can't do a clinical for every ingredient. But when you show that on a cell, from skeletal muscle cells and how they behave under creatine versus PeptiStrong, and you show a massive difference there, it should convey. So 5x superiority and also protein synthesis. So when you're looking at how much protein your cells are producing in a certain time with PeptiStrong versus with creatine, you're sinking 5 times more of PeptiStrong with PeptiStrong, for example.
Wow.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mark and Jay, we got 3 minutes.
Wow, so many questions. So one person said this is crazy town. I think that's a good thing, right? Another person said their jaw is literally on the floor, but I'm not sure if we have a peptide for that. There were some fairly basic questions, and one was like, can I take PeptiStrong with my protein drink? Is that a problem? And then others asked, is there an age limit? Like if I'm 90 years old, is it still going to benefit me? What are your thoughts?
It's really interesting, Mark. So we're doing aging trials, but also aging. We have a really interesting model in the lab before we're going into clinical, where we have older cells versus younger cells and how they behave. And what we're seeing is that the mechanisms we went after with PeptiStrong are fundamental to both young and old. Okay, so they will work in old, and what we're seeing is that they actually have tremendous effects even more as we age, which is really interesting. So, and we've done a lot of that work in the lab, and it's going to be published, hopefully in Nature Metabolism soon. So we're showing some of that work already, and that is all the combinations I showed you, all the references between creatine, HMB, whey, all that's going to be published work soon as well. So that is interesting. And what's also interesting is that the others that I mentioned within the muscle area, let's say leucine, for example, leucine only works when you're younger. As you age, leucine actually loses its activity. Mm-hmm. So having, enriched products with leucine for the older 60 plus, etc., actually would not have an efficacy, and people don't know that. But that a lot of the results we're seeing show that efficacy. So that's one. And your second one, so the aging in your second one, Mark, was on.
It's like a lot of people want to take PeptiStrong with their protein shakes.
Yeah, absolutely, because it basically, PeptiStrong is an igniter. Protein is a nutrient, so it's like fuel. But if your engine is kind of slow or you want to kind of get it running more, that's PeptiStrong. So PeptiStrong is an igniter of your engine. And with the nutrient, with protein, you're moving faster. You're reversing your age. You're improving the health of your cell, of your skeletal cell, muscle skeletal cells. And that's really important. And because you can pour so much nutrients on your cells if they're not consuming it right. It's a waste of protein. It literally is. So with PeptiStrong, it's that igniter. It's how to use. It's a signal to the cells on how to use your protein better. And that's literally what PeptiStrong does. It's you definitely want to use it. It works on its own, but with protein even more because, so you definitely need to be taking it with your protein every day.
I know that we're short on time, but I have one more question the context of this question comes up all the time because I think a lot of what people hear about peptides is from the therapeutic injectable peptide world.
Yes.
And I'm guessing that this is part of that. But Connie asked, like her doctors are saying that you have to cycle peptides, like on 5 days, off 2. Is this necessary with our natural bioactive peptides that are ingestible?
So I don't know what peptides she's on, but ultimately a lot of the injectable peptides are modified to last in your system for a certain period of time, usually. So they would last for a few days, a few weeks, depending, because they're chemically modified to kind of turn in your blood and keep going. Mm-hmm. And that's why they'll tell you, you use it for a certain period, you don't use it for a while, and you come in and use it again. These are different. They're not modified peptides. They're peptides found the way they're found in nature. They're acting in nature already. So it is about using them you notice a difference very quickly, by the way. PeptiStrong, you'll notice immediately the energy levels. It's not about the spike of caffeine and the up and down of the caffeine part. It's more of a constant level, long-term energy. You'll notice the muscle difference. You'll notice you're stronger, you recover faster. Those things are noticed immediately after a few days. But you do need to take it regularly.
Yep. So you're saying that you don't need to cycle these like you would an injectable. Right? These take them every day, no problem. Yep. Love it. Thank you.
Jay, bring us home. One last question.
Well, Dr. Nora, thank you so much for being on. We had almost 1,000 people on live. We'll have thousands of more people that will replay this recording in our Facebook group here tonight. So what a major impact. We really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about the benefits of PeptiStrong. So speaking of that, and maybe this kind of parlays a little bit off of Dr. Mark's question here. So Ann Shabley actually asked, do the benefits of FIT featuring PeptiStrong increase the longer you use it? Now, I know that you're just finished another clinical that studied actually a longer period of time. We're going to share some of these results at our event here coming up in a couple of weeks. But maybe just a quick little insight into what are we seeing about the longevity of using it kind of month after month. A lot of our people will actually set up subscription and they'll have this product delivered to them each month. And I think it's not an inexpensive product. And so I think they want a little bit of that. Is it really helping me kind of month after month after month? Are the benefits building? So maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely, Justin. So what we've noticed so far is that there's a buildup. In general, peptides with signaling, there's always a buildup in terms of, and I'm trying to give you a concrete example. not with PeptiStrong, but with general with peptides. So, and I'll come back to it. But ultimately, yes, in the clinicals we've done, what we've noticed, whether it's clinicals orally, like with PeptiStrong or other of our peptides on face, etc., as we cut 2 weeks, a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and moving on, you notice an efficacy that increases with time, and that's important. But also, if you look at muscles, skeletal muscles, for example, and some of this we haven't fully published yet, but ultimately, if you look at fat deposit within the skeletal muscle, even though as you move in time and you're taking these peptides, the fat deposition within the skeletal muscle actually comes down with time, and that is something that's really interesting because that correlates with strength. So the fat that comes through and sits between skeletal muscle threads actually starts depositing with age, and with the use of PeptiStrong that diminishes, and that means you become stronger over time. So yes, you'll see an increase over time of the efficacy as you're taking it.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Nora, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Just a little bit of a sneak peek here. We'll do more Zooms with Dr. Nora, and we'll certainly let everybody know ahead of time. For the upcoming event that's coming up here, Dr. Nora has a previous engagement, so she's not going to be able to be with us in person, but she offered up the next best thing, which is her chief scientist, Dr. Andy. So he will actually be there with us in person. We're going to have him speak. We've got a couple of other representatives from the company also coming. So Dr. Nora, thank you so much for being so gracious and in letting us use your people for this big event we've got coming up. And we absolutely look forward to having you on again real soon.
Thanks, Justin. Yes, so you'll meet Andy, who is our chief medical, really interesting background, and has actually carried out a lot of these clinicals as well. So he can explain them even further. So I'd love to thank you as well. Like I started at the beginning, Truman, when you mentioned meeting myself, same thing. When I met you guys, the visions aligned. And it's always interesting to see, like I said, when visions align, what can be done. There's no limit. So, and I want to thank everyone that has sat this evening to listen in. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks a million.
Thank you so much, Nora. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is not 17 shades of lipstick. This is landscape-changing technology right here.
Yes.
And we have the privilege of taking it to the marketplace. So let's go get it.
Thanks, guys. Good evening.
Bye.
Bye.